in the environment and teaching people to eat those. Carotenes exist in many different forms in the environment, and a lot of different plants can produce carotenes. So if a bit of plant botany was done and suitable edible plants were identified that contain carotenoids, this might be a far more pragmatic solution since you don't have to develop and distribute a new plant. You can just take advantage of the carotenoids that a local plant already produces. Maybe there's issues with that approach, and if you have any opinions, I'd love to hear them down in the comments. Another interesting thing about vitamin A is that doctors have to be really careful when prescribing vitamin A to female sex patients of childbearing age, as they could be pregnant, and vitamin A can be teratogenic, and it's an abortifacient. That means that it's something that you definitely want to avoid. We've given a lot of time talking about the biology, but let's talk about the chemistry of vitamin A. Retinol is a polyunsaturated, polyconjugated compound with a terminal alcohol group. When a synthetic chemist sees this many double bonds in a row, we know we're going to have a bad time. It's quite impressive that BCO1 is able to do that selective oxidation of beta-carotene. A lot of the time in chemistry, we have tools to selectively react with specific functional groups, but nature is way better than organic chemists at doing chemistry selectively. Vitamin A is an important nutrient. In terms of being a vitamin, it plays an important role, and it's necessary in the diet. I know you're probably thinking, Joey, it's vitamin A. We already are expecting you to put it in A tier. And you're right. Vitamin A can go right into A tier. The next chemical in this tier list is thiamine, also known as vitamin B1. Some other forms of thiamine, other vitamers, include thiamine monophosphate and diphosphate. There's another chemical that has a similar name to thiamine called thymine. Thymine is a nucleobase in DNA synthesis. Thymine is different than thiamine. For clarity, I'll try to say thiamine as clearly as possible. In North America, most flour is fortified, meaning that it usually has vitamin B1, B2, B3, and B9 added to it. The main nutritional sources of vitamin B1, aside from fortified flour, include eggs, non-refined whole grains, yeast, meat, vegetables, and nuts. The processing of grains removes the outer layer where the vitamin B1 is contained. As a consequence of this, processed flour that hasn't been fortified is deficient of the B vitamin that would be contained on the outside of the grain. As such, it probably isn't surprising to you that the consumption of solely white rice in your diet can lead to the development of vitamin B1 deficiency. While most flour and cereals are fortified, it's possible that if you're a celiac and you're consuming a gluten-free alternative, that your flour might not be fortified. So this is an important thing to look into, as you might not be getting the vitamins that you need in your diet, and this is something you might want to consult a doctor about. The B vitamins are water soluble. That means that they're more likely to be deficient in the diet, and they're less likely to cause toxicity. Since vitamin B1 is one of the B vitamins, this is going to be a water soluble one. For most of the metabolic reactions in our body, we need to be using the phosphorylated forms of thiamine, which for the most part is thiamine diphosphate. The most important role of thiamine is for the production of acetyl-CoA from pyruvate. Acetyl-CoA enters the TCA cycle, and this eventually results in the production of NADH in the cytoplasm. Depending on the different energy sources that you consume, your body can still produce energy. Now, what do we mean when we say that? Well, in this case, the breakdown of fats, sugars, and proteins all result in the formation of alpha keto acids. Usually these alpha keto acids are in the form of acyl-CoAs, and our body is able to use this to produce NADH, which can be used to generate ATP. Earlier on, I mentioned that the consumption of white rice solely could cause vitamin B1 deficiency. What is vitamin B1 deficiency? This is a syndrome known as beriberi. There are two different types of beriberi. There's dry beriberi, which involves neuropathy, and there's wet beriberi, which involves dilated cardiomyopathy. Another case where beriberi can arise is in alcoholics. If you're interested in why vitamin B1 deficiency can occur due to alcoholism, I'd encourage you to check out the recent video that we made on neurotoxins. Alcohol is a neurotoxin that depletes vitamin B1, and we talk about that a little bit more in that video. In terms of biological functions, vitamin B1 is a cofactor in biochemical reactions that result in the production of ATP. The main role that it plays is for the transfer of 2 carbon units. This is done with a dehydrogenase enzyme. Because it makes acetyl-CoA from pyruvate, the acetyl group is the 2 carbon unit of acetyl-CoA. Additionally, thiamine can be used as an N-heterocyclic carbene precursor in synthetic chemistry, as it forms this really neat thing called a Breslau intermediate, which has a ton of synthetic utility for organic chemists. When you take something like an aldehyde and treat it with a carbene, such as the one that vitamin B1 forms, it can form this neat thing called a Breslau intermediate. This gives you the synthetic equivalent of an acyl anion, and you don't have to do any sort of crazy deprotonation to generate an acyl anion. In fact, acyl anions aren't actually stable, which is why we have synthetic alternatives, such as the Corey-Seebach reaction, although we just access this for free, using something we find in nature. This acyl anion equivalent can be functionalized to generate a lot of different interesting products. Similar to how vitamin B1 is able to form a Breslau intermediate with aldehydes, Our body is actually able to react vitamin B1, and this enables decarboxylation reactions. One example of this is the generation of acetyl-CoA from pyruvate, where initially the carbene is able to attack the ketone, and the molecule can undergo a decarboxylation reaction. The resulting anion is stabilized, and it can actually be drawn as a Breslau intermediate. All we really did here is access an aldehyde through a decarboxylation reaction thanks to thiamine. Thanks, biology, this one's actually pretty cool. When we're producing acetyl-CoA, thiamine diphosphate is used during glycolysis to produce acetyl-CoA using pyruvate dehydrogenase, magnesium, as well as NADH. NADH is another important cofactor that we're going to get to later on when we discuss niacin. This reaction generates an equivalent of NADH, and this is the reduced form of NAD+. That NADH is about to be cold hard cash in the electron transport chain of the mitochondria, the US stock exchange of the cell. If you're not sure what a dehydrogenase is, this just involves decarboxylation as well as conjugation with CoA. CoA is another important molecule that we're going to get to a little bit later. In addition to glycolysis, thiamine is used in the Krebs cycle. Acetyl-CoA is like the digital funds that are in a holding account, which your cells are going to use to buy stock, such as NADH. This is a stock exchange after all. I better have some stock analogies in here. The other cofactors and coenzymes in this process are like the people who broker the deal. One example is the enzyme alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase. This is where the exchange happens. The enzyme, which is essentially the exchange here, is alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase. Alternatively, this is also used in branched-chain alpha-keto acid dehydrogenase. There's also a couple other pathways such as the HMP shunt in transketolase, but we're not going to get into that. Since B1 is involved in the synthesis of NADH, it finances the mitochondria. ATP, baby, let the cash flow. Now let's talk about the chemistry of vitamin B1 a bit. Vitamin B1 has a pyrimidine ring, as well as a thiazolium, but when this is deprotonated, it forms a carbene. We also have an alcohol group and this amino group sticking off here. Overall, I think the chemistry of vitamin B1 makes me think it's pretty neat, and when I learned about the whole formation of a Breslau intermediate, I am a chemist after all, I got super stoked about biochemistry. So for that reason, vitamin B1 got me hyped about biochemistry. I think we could put vitamin B1 right into S tier. Next, we have another B vitamin, riboflavin. If you like yellow chemistry, riboflavin is the vitamin for you.
All yellow chemistry is trash. If it's yellow, it's trash and your synthesis doesn't work. If your synthesis at any point goes yellow, it just stops working, all right? Confirmed fact.
Riboflavin comes from the root flavio, which means yellow. Vitamin B2 has 3 forms, including riboflavin, flavin mononucleotide, and flavin adenine dinucleotide. These are known as FMN and FADH accordingly. FMN and FAD are cofactors derived from riboflavin and vitamin B complexes. It's possible to get your vitamin B through enriched grains, such as wheat flour. Although, it's also possible to take B vitamin supplements, which contain lots of vitamin B2. If you want natural sources, yeast, eggs, and mushrooms all have lots of vitamin B2. Vitamin B2 enters the body bound to albumin, and first it must be cleaved by hydrochloric acid in the stomach and absorbed in the duodenum, or duodenum, if you prefer. Vitamin B2 toxicity is less likely. Once again, this is another B vitamin, and all the B vitamins are water-soluble. Riboflavin deficiency is rare in North America. This is likely because we fortify our food. Some causes of riboflavin deficiency include malnutrition, such as in abject poverty, anorexia nervosa, and aversion from drinking milk. This could be because you're lactose intolerant. There's riboflavin in milk. If you drink less milk, because the milk can be damaged by UV, you end up absorbing less of the B2. It's also possible that you have normal intake, but you have decreased consumption. This could be due to IBS, celiac disease, OCPs, long-term barbiturate use, or MADD. Riboflavin is also